All right, welcome everybody. Happy New Year. Today we're gonna have Jennifer discuss and tell us about apparel and tech design career. And before we start, let's do make sure you check in. It's for your teacher to know that you are here and not anywhere else. And if you have questions, you can refer to these great question documents. And most importantly, the evaluation form. This is how we can record that you're attended, and it's the requirement for you to graduate. And you can turn on your camera. You're not going to be on the recording. And if you have questions, just put it on the chat. Be fully present, pay attention, ask questions, participate. Um, don't be on your phone so that you can ask questions. And then this is the most important thing. It's the evaluation form. It's your attendance. It's how we give you credit. And that is it for me. Jennifer, you can go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. It's really nice to see all of you. If you want to turn your camera on, it's always so much more fun to talk to actual faces. That's something we've learned in the Zoom world these days. Cameras on. So I am currently a tech designer at Nike. What that means is that I help designers bring their products to life. There are so many different careers in the apparel world. So a lot of people call it fashion. Most people in this industry call it apparel. You can work for a very large corporation. You can work for a very small corporation. You can work for yourself. I'm sure that you guys have all seen a lot of different kinds of apparel labels in the world. It's pretty common. We all wear clothes. We're living in very interesting times. I just want to take the opportunity to point out that one of the number one things that's affecting society right now is a mask. That's something that you wear. Let's just take note of that. Very interesting stuff. There's a lot of psychology behind clothing. There are a lot of issues of sustainability. There are a lot of issues around fit. There are a lot of issues around process. It is a worldwide global industry. Tonight, I have a call with Hong Kong and Sri Lanka. So I'm constantly working with people all over the world. I love that aspect of my job. It's really cool to get to reach out and work with other cultures. We in the US don't have a lot of manufacturing capability anymore. The rest of the world has taken over. Mostly Asia and Central America, South and Central America have taken over our manufacturing. So you do have to work with people all over the place. Consequently, I've traveled a ton. I've been to India, been to South and Central America. I've visited farms. I have visited manufacturing facilities of all kinds. There are fabric making mills, they're called, for making all the different types of fabric. The different types of fabric that are in the world are synthetics and naturals, or wovens and knits. A lot of the knits and synthetics are based in Asia, just because that's how things have evolved. A lot of the cottons are based out of India, some in Turkey and that kind of area, and then a lot in South and Central America. So there are a ton of jobs covering that whole gamut. You're gonna start with an idea. You wanna say maybe make a jacket or a t-shirt, and you're gonna start with your design process. That, depending on the size of company that you work for, is gonna come to you in different ways. If you're a very small company, which I have run my own, and I'll get into that a little bit, but if you're a very small company, you take on a lot of those processes yourself. So you're doing everything from start to finish in some cases. In other cases, say at Nike, we're very big. So we're going to be, as a designer, there's a product manager and marketing people and NXT, which is like, innovation kind of stuff happening. And that is all kind of before design even happens in a lot of cases. And so once you get all of that information happening, you get to design, and then that design is then presented to a whole team in the case of working for a larger corporation. That larger team includes a materials developer, a tech designer, oftentimes an Asia product development partner. Who else? Sometimes it's broken out into developer versus tech designer. Some places it's combined. So all of those different things mean a lot of different things. I'll get back to that. And then after that product is handed off, the factory makes it, and then we get prototypes back. We have fit sessions. We use a drafts form or a live fit model. A lot of times in activewear, you need a live fit model so that you can see how an armhole moves, or see how a zipper functions, or see how the angle of a pocket might work. And then we give that feedback back to the factory, and they create another prototype and we get it approved. And then from there, there's a ton of work to do. So then we have analysts, financial people, costing people. We have people who are working on the fabric. So on that fabric side, you have the actual materials development, where there's a ton of innovation happening right now. When I talk about sustainability, that's probably the #1 place where we are able to currently affect things. That is a huge, huge topic, and we'll get back to it. But not only are they creating what the content and the actual makeup of that material is, but they're working with the mills on, in Asia or in Central America or wherever it is to create innovations. And so, with knits, there's a ton of different ways how the fabric can actually physically be knit together to create different performance aspects to it. There's different content. So you've got like a lot of polyester, but you can also use nylon. You can also combine that with spandex. And that does make up a lot of the activewear, but there are a lot of new fibers. It's constantly changing. It's a super fascinating field. And then also in the materials world, there's surface design. So that's like the prints that you see on fabrics. You walk into, I don't know where you guys shop, H&M, so many places. We're all shopping online right now. But prints are a huge driver in sales. And what happens is once you get a product developed, then you can re-release that in different prints or different colorways and kind of make that original design work that you put into the product go longer and make more money. Talk about money. Fashion, it's a business, hands down. I see, are there questions in the chat at all? Feel free to throw questions in, you guys. And feel free to come off mute and just put your hand up and let me know if you have something that you want to chat about. So let's see, where was I? Yes, money. Everything in this world seems to evolve around money to some degree, right? And fashion is absolutely no exception. At the end of the day, a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the art side, the fun side, the creative side, and that's super important. But the other aspect is the financial side. And they really have to work together in order for us to have the products that we need to wear. I just want to really emphasize that no matter what, at the end of the day, I've been in a scenario where I've come up with a ton of ideas, and then you make a great product, and then you get it to the manufacturing production house sample room, and it comes back and it's just so expensive that there's no way to make it. So that's a huge part of being a designer, is understanding what the cost is. We can talk all day about that, but that's the biggest point about that. When I talk about sustainability around materials, so there are quite a few ways that the apparel industry is working on reevaluating and tackling this massive problem, which I'm sure you guys are aware of. There's a lot of talk about circular economy, and I encourage you guys to learn what that is. But basically, it means that you want to have a closed loop. So you want to understand what your upstream and downstream partners are doing with the materials. You want to focus on the raw materials. So let's say I go to Peru, which I did, and I meet with the farmers and I say, wow, this is some beautiful cotton in a flower form. Now, what are we going to do with that cotton? Understanding the resources that it takes to create that flower, to create the cotton, to go pull and make it into fabric. Then you're also going to have, creating that fabric, you're going to have materials and energy use. And how does that play into it? Here in the United States, we rely heavily on electricity, which is fantastic. But in other countries, that's not necessarily an easy thing to come by. There's a lot of issue with having that be a sustainable scenario. And there are companies working on it. So much there. And then you have the dyeing of the fabric. So there are things like you can do what's called a dry dyeing process, which takes the fabric in a big kind of tumble drying scenario, and it adds it to the fabric without water. So that's a really interesting new kind of innovation happening. There are all kinds of innovations, and what we need from you all and myself, the current and future generations, is just so many more ideas about how to innovate in that world. So there's a ton of space. If you want to get into truly affecting a product, that is a great space to be in, materials development. So other sustainability things that you can do as a designer, there's a lot of talk about like things like zero waste patterns. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that term. It's a really great idea, but then what happens once you use all that material? It's in use, right? So let me see, I should have made a slide. Another way that you can affect material consumption, it's called, is by making a marker. And that's a lot like playing a little bit of a Tetris game. So what happens as a tech designer, I work on this a lot. So we'll go ahead and make all of the patterns, and then we'll line them up on a giant kind of placemat. We do it all digital now. It used to be all by hand, because they used to just make a giant table like 50 feet long. And basically you line the pattern pieces up and you try and reduce your fabric consumption by creating the tightest map that you can, while making it easy enough for someone to cut. So in that factory process, they're gonna get the materials, they have to lay them out. Oftentimes they have to rest for 24 hours. Sometimes materials are stacked 100 piles deep, or sometimes it's 3, just depending on what you have. Then the marker gets printed out and laid over the top of that. And then there's a giant, it's like a big cutting, driving blade that you use, and you put a glove on this hand and you hold it down, and you have to actually go along. So we're still dealing with cut and sew. Everything's so modern in this world, but we're still dealing with this kind of very handmade process still, and it's real. So you have to be thinking about, can someone cut that out, right? And then they take all those piles and they create bundles, and they take them out to the sewers, and then the sewers have different processes that they do. So say there's a serger. A serger is something that you would see, like if you take the inside of your t-shirt and you turn over the seam, you're gonna see like a wiggle, 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 wiggle. That's like a serge seam. And it basically, it holds together knits. So there's somebody who's like got that machine all set up and coordinated for that fabric and that machine with the right thread, because there are a ton of different threads as well. And they're running it through that. And then they're going to pass it off to their partner who maybe has a single needle machine, and they're going along and putting on the tag, finishing out the neckline with the ribbing and adding in that like little edge stitch that we all see on our t-shirts. If you guys have any garments that you have questions about how they did it, feel free to flash it up. Let's see. So once they do that, there's also once the whole garment is made in the factory, there's a quality control process. And that's a really big deal. It's quite extensive. Are the labels in the correct order? Are things bagged properly? Are they folded properly? When you get into big production, there's a whole lot of those kinds of things. And then they're shipped all over the world, as you guys know. So I'll just put that aside. I'll take just 1 second if anyone has any questions they want to flash up or just pop on the screen and ask.
There's a few questions actually in the chat.
Awesome.
Do you want me to read them? Or do you want to go through?
Yeah, I can just open that up. What's my favorite thing to design or create? Shirts, pants, etc. Well, I've designed a lot of different things. I've designed everything from wedding dresses to sports bras to swimwear to leggings to pants, you name it. I think my favorite thing, you can kind of see behind me, I have a dress form. This is, I have 2 dress forms actually. I'll just kind of get out of the way. They don't have any clothes on, sorry. they're just raw, but one of my favorite things to do is to drape. And so draping is where you take the fabric and you put it on the dress form, and it's basically like sculpting. So that's my absolute favorite home in the world, is to sculpt on my dress form. And so I love to make dresses, wedding dresses, regular dresses, fancy dresses, all kinds of dresses. I'll take the next question. What education is required for this career? Such a great question. It depends on what you want to be, and it depends on where you want to go. If you want to be a tech designer, which means that you're going to be making patterns, you're going to be talking to factories a lot of those processes that I just described, then you definitely want to go get your degree. You could just get a 2-year degree. I work with people who have 2-year degrees from LA. I'm spacing the FITM. There's FIT in New York and FITM in LA. There's also OSU that has a program for apparel design science. It is a science, by the way, even if you if you plan on being totally creative and being a fashion designer, it's usually a degree in science. Let's see. I would definitely recommend getting your 4-year degree at this point. I know that that's kind of an unpopular thing to talk about, but I don't know what you guys have heard, and the world is constantly changing. But I feel like once you get that 4-year degree in a basic thing like apparel design, you can take it anywhere. You could go be a designer, you can go be a tech designer, you can go work in materials development, you can go work in surface design. So there's just like a ton of careers. There's also graphic designers that I work with a lot. So that's a whole other thing. You don't even have to go to an apparel school to be a graphic designer. And they're the ones who are creating sometimes the surface patterns. That's much more specialized, but a lot of times we have just like, a Nike logo. And so There's a lot of that kind of stuff. So what I would recommend is that you go to college. And I would recommend that you figure out how to pay for your college. It doesn't necessarily, you don't have to go to the fanciest school to get a job. What really matters is that you have a portfolio and that you're getting opportunities to connect with people in the industry. And sometimes that is about what school you go to. So it depends on what you want to do. I went to PSU. It took me 20 years to graduate. I went and started my own business and then went back to school. There are so many routes. So don't get discouraged. You know, everyone's different. Everyone has a different life path. Everyone has a different story. But I feel like if you can go ahead and get your education sooner, you're going to make more money in life, number one, and you're going to have more opportunities down the road. And feel free to ask me more specifics around that. What's a typical day in the life for this job? Well, right now we're all working from home. So a typical day equals a lot of Zoom meetings with my cross-functional partners. So I have a triad team that I work with. And that includes a designer, a color designer, a tech designer, a graphic designer, and a product manager. I forgot to mention that U of O has a really good master's program for product management, if anyone's interested in that aspect of things. The product manager is a person who is very much paying attention to the business side of things, but they also have to be versed in what happens and the whole process in the apparel industry. They make more than I do. It's a great career. Let's see. So yeah, more on the typical day. So a lot of times I'm creating tech packs. That's what a tech designer does. A tech pack is basically a map or a book of instructions for the factory to make a product. So I'm including in that tech pack illustrations, specific construction callouts, like sketches for those. How does the pocket sit on the jacket with this special application? How does this zipper work with like a zipper garage, a hood? You guys kind of get what I'm saying. So we have to draw all of that out in Illustrator. That's another one of my homes, Adobe, the whole suite. Learn it now. It will be with you for your entire life as far as I can see in the world. And then the other things that go in tech packs are a BOM, bill of materials. And so that means that you're going to list out everything that goes into a product to create that. So it's like the body fabric, the thread, the zippers, all the trims. You got to call out the colors. Sometimes you have to call out the yardage. And then you turn all of that along with a pattern over to the factory. And then they make another tech pack on their side that has like order of operations, sewing instructions, and really big detail stuff. If I am designing and not just doing tech design, then oftentimes my process starts off with finding inspiration, creating inspiration boards, and making sure that those are something that I'm going to refer back to make sure that my design is on track with what I wanted to say to the world. So that's kind of this before part that I talked about before, where I have to know who my customer is. I have to know how much this product could sell for, what's the market. And then I take all of that information, I find inspiration in the world and I put it together. And then I make sketches. There's a lot of different ways to do sketches. You know, you can do it on paper, you can do it right in Illustrator. There are things called croquis, and that's what they're like little dolls that you can draw on. That's what we all use. If you go online, it's spelled CROQUIS. And there are all kinds of croquis. There are very realistic croquis. There are very fashion croquis. And that difference really quickly. If you're in design school in, say, a European fancy design house oriented school, you're going to probably be working on extra small all the time. But in my world, we're on mediums all the time, because what happens is when you make a pattern, you have to start with a base size, and then we grade a pattern. So that means that we have to make it bigger. And as that pattern gets bigger, it gets distorted in certain areas if you grade it too far one way. And that's geometry, which I was horrible at in school, but now I use it all the time. And don't be scared of it. Hopefully you have a really good teacher, but basically, seeing those shapes and working with those shapes is a really big deal. And then, so after I sketched something up, I could go to draping on my dress form, and I could take photos of that, or I could drape and make a pattern directly out of that. And then oftentimes I am making a flat pattern. You can make a flat pattern on paper, or you can do it digitally if you're lucky enough to have access to the software. There are a lot of new 3D programs which are going to be a part of your life. This is just the way the world is going. I'm in the middle of learning 2 different digital programs. One I'm more advanced in, and the other is brand new to me. Those programs are called Browseware and Clo. Browseware, BROWZEAR, Clo, CLO, and they're very cool. They allow you to do the whole process at once. So I can build a pattern right in that software, and then I have an avatar. I can create that avatar, or I can use an avatar, or I can manipulate an avatar to be something that I want it to be, and then I can create something right on that avatar. I'm just going on and on. Let me get to the next question. Is it helpful to learn other languages? Always. The number one language that I could be using right now is Chinese. The second would be Spanish, which I do speak some of. What colleges do you recommend? We kind of talked about that a little bit. One thing I will say is that the people that I work with that are really excelling and getting to do the most fun stuff are people who have spent time going to school in New York or in Europe somewhere. And that doesn't always mean like you have to go do the full thing, but if you can have some experience like a semester abroad, or you can go get your master's degree somewhere else, there are a ton of programs. Just because Europe is older, they've been doing this a lot longer. Let's see. What would be so expensive you can't make it? Give an example. Well, okay, so I designed a men's trail running short recently, and I don't know if you guys know about trail running, but they have to pack a lot of things in their pockets. So they're carrying a lot of gear, but they also want to be super lightweight. And so this short got so expensive with all of those pockets and all of those layers and all of those belts to keep it secure that we had to kind of dumb it down a little bit. And so that's very typical. Nothing's ever going to get so expensive you can't make it, because you just can't do that as a designer. Why did I choose this career over others? I was always attracted to art. I did art all the time. And I loved sculpture, and I loved working with my hands. And I also have always been super fascinated with this idea of personal shelter. And so that all went very well into apparel design. And I did go to school at AI as well, and they're no longer here. But when you go to AI or any other college, you're going to learn those basic things like draping, pattern making, and construction and sketching. And I fell in love with it when I was there. And that would be my biggest advice. I don't think apparel is the biggest money-making industry, but if you love what you're doing, it really carries you through the day. Working with good people, getting to do what you love. And I like to be able to make a difference in the world. So I know that any sustainability pushes that I can push for really will do something. I'll skip through a few of these. What companies have I worked for? So I had my own company for a long time, and that was a women's lifestyle sustainable material company. I had my own storefront here in Portland, and I built my own manufacturing facility. When I did that, I started with a couple of local sewers and built up my product and built up my sales to the point where I needed my own production. And at the time, for me, my values were very oriented toward local production and creating local jobs and creating a living wage. That hasn't really changed for me as far as values, but the world is a really big place and that's very hard to pull off. I had a great time doing it. I didn't really make a lot of money having my own company. And I think it's just very hard to make it in apparel. So, you know, we did make great money, but when it comes down to purchasing materials, paying employees, keeping a storefront open. I also had a wholesale business. So we went wholesale from San Francisco to Seattle out to Sun Valley, just kind of a cute little West Coast pocket. And it was a ton of work. You know, you're always on the road, you're always updating your website. And on top of that, you have to come up with new designs. And I loved it and I would do it again. But right now I'm making some money because my daughter's in college. So I'm working for Nike. I've also worked for a couple of other companies like Handful. They create sports bras. They're a local activewear company. I've worked for a lot of little startups along the way. So that's how I went to India. I did a feasibility study for sustainability there. There's so many different places and types of places to work. Where did I learn all of this from? Why did it take me 20 years to go to PSU? Yeah, so I learned all of this kind of slowly along the way, you know, and I said everyone has their own path. For me, I graduated from high school and moved to Portland, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I started off doing art, but I was also interested in science. And it just took me a long time to figure out that I wanted to do apparel. And so finally I figured out that I wanted to do apparel. And instead of staying in school, like I told you guys to do, I left school and started my own business. And then after I left that business, I got into sustainability a lot, and I found that I couldn't get a job like I have right now without a 4-year degree. No matter what type of degree it is, a lot of companies just want you to check off that box of a 4-year degree. I want to be a shoe designer. What do you need to do for that? My husband is a shoe designer for Nike. He's an industrial designer. Industrial design is not my forte, but that's what you want to look into. There's a local program that I've worked with here in Portland called Pensole, and that's spelled Pensole. And they work with students to learn how to design shoes and apparel. They are a smaller program, and they would be something that you might do kind of after you've done some of your 4-year education, or maybe over a summer as a supplementary program. But they would be an excellent resource to check into. If you guys want to have my husband back to talk about shoe design, he would absolutely do that. Let's see. Let's see. What's the culture in fashion? Well, that's a really cool question. Thanks for asking all these questions, you guys. The culture in fashion changes all the time. I would say that when I started in fashion in the early 2000s, there was still a lot of, I don't know how to put it in a really nice PC way. There was a lot of snobby stuff going on. You know, it just kind of went with the territory to be more important than other people, which is really not my style. And I think that the world has evolved a lot. And I'm really happy that you guys are going to come into a different world. Currently, the culture is much more oriented toward inclusivity. I don't know if you guys have seen all of this really cool stuff around size inclusivity, meaning that, you know, a lot of labels didn't even offer something over a size 10. So there's a lot more options around that. There's also a lot of culture around building a good team and working together. You know, you're always going to run into people who think they're more important than you are, or, you know, there's always going to be that element in the world, but I really think that the culture is moving toward this much more hands holding, do it together, nice approach. Let's see. Our students want to know how much Nike pays me. Well, let's see, how do I answer that? Okay, so I'm what's called an ETW. So right now I'm a contractor. There are benefits to being a contractor, and there are less benefits. As a contractor, you take on contracts, and that means that could be for 6 months, it could be for 3 months, and they have to pay me at a little bit higher rate because they're not giving me all of the benefits to work there. Benefits usually are like 401k, health insurance, stock programs, on and on. And so, you know, while I might not have that, I have more cash in my hand, and I don't have to stay if I don't want to. So it's kind of an interesting way to do it. I would say that most people in my position are making around $100,000 a year, which is a good income, but it's not as much as, say, an industrial designer makes, or, you know, like I have a couple of bosses who definitely make much more than that. If that doesn't answer the question, you can let me know. And what are the current projects I'm working on with Nike? I think I can't get too much into that, but I can give you some broad strokes. I work in women's fitness and yoga, and so we're working on creating activewear for all these ladies who want to do yoga and walk and run and hike. I don't want to get in trouble by telling you guys things that I shouldn't. Does anybody want to pop on camera and let me know, maybe where are you guys at? What things are you interested in? And are there schools that you specifically know about that you would like to ask me about, or specific projects you're interested in, or types of design that you're interested in? Don't be afraid to come on out.
I just want to add into it, like the school we have in Portland, it's called Portland Fashion Institute. So it's kind of like a trade school that if you want to get your fit, like, you know, just try it out without spending too much money. If it's the apparel design, or, you know, in the fashion that you want to be in. And I will put that on the chat. It's called Portland Fashion Institute. Mm-hmm. And they offer scholarship for high school. So.
Oh, that's great. Scholarships are the best. Yeah, Portland Fashion Institute is good. I've worked with a few different people who've come out of there. To be honest, they're not designers. They're all doing developer jobs. But that's a great place to start, and you can always work your way up. And that's not saying that there are a lot of other people out there doing independent work and making that happen. There is also, like, what is it called? Fashion NXT. There are a lot of things going on in Portland. It's gotten quiet over the pandemic, but it will pick back up. How long is the process of creation to actually selling it? Well, you know, if you're doing that yourself, it can be very short. But if you're doing it in a bigger company, let's see, I'm working on wrapping up spring 23 right now. And my husband is working on shoes, and they're going all the way to 2030. So we're definitely working really far in advance. A lot of that has to do with trend forecasting and color forecasting, which is a whole nother part of things that I didn't really talk about. There are trend services like WGSN is one of them, or Women's Wear Daily, WWD. They come out with trend reports and forecasts all the time. And that means that they hire people, and maybe you guys want to do this. It's a really fun job. Go out and you go on the streets of New York or wherever, maybe even Portland if we're cool enough, and you see what the kids are doing. You see what the cool people are doing, and you find inspiration, and you find information saying like, here's a lot of people doing that, and here's the direction we're going. The same thing happens with color, but they're in Pantone, Pantone is the big company that works with color, and they forecast a couple of years in advance. Every year they come out with a color of the year, which is a really fun thing to look up. I really encourage you guys to find blogs, architecture blogs, car blogs, color blogs. There are tons of websites and magazines and online magazines that are working to get trend information out there, and you can collect it yourself, because I know you guys are all young and you have your finger on the dial, because my daughter's 20 and she's not even cool anymore like you guys. Does my husband work as a contractor as well? No, he doesn't. Industrial design is a little bit more specialized. There's some really good schools for industrial design, but you'll have to have him back. I'll tell Goldilocks about him. How can students learn now to get ready for this, or what can students learn now to get ready for this career? Really good question. So number one, pay attention to what's going on in the world, like we just talked about. I would say that learning the science behind materials is a huge thing. Even if you just want to be a designer, you need to pay attention to how those materials work together. Are they water repellent? Are they warm? You know, there's a ton of innovation happening around all of that, and it's only going to continue to get more interesting. I'm going to use the words more interesting as the world goes on, and we start to have to really shift our ideas about how we're using natural resources. So I would say paying attention to sustainability and science materials is really important. The other thing that's super important is to sketch. A lot of companies want to make sure that, you know, even if I would say that if you can sketch and do that kind of flashy, fun drawing that people like to see, you're going to get a long way with that. And what I mean by that is, like, you know, we've all seen movies where fashion designers sketch up something. Yes, it's that, but you also have to be able to, that drawing is a communication tool. So in apparel, we're really lucky to be able to use visuals for communication tools. So sketch your hearts out, and don't be worried about, you know, nailing it the first time. Just do it every day, and it's a practice, and I'm sure you've heard all of that, but it is absolutely true. Other things you can do to prepare for this career. If I had to do it all over again, I would definitely look into going to a school where I knew I was going to get into jobs that I would rather be doing, which would be design. I love doing tech design, but it's the technical side, and that's a totally great thing to do in the world. But there is that creative versus technical. If you like pattern making a lot, which is like a math problem, which I think is super fun, great, then you probably want to go the pattern making and tech design route. And pattern makers can make a lot of money. If you get really expert in your field, you can make a lot of money. There's a lot of innovation happening around patterns now too, where, and I don't know if you guys know about this, but there are things called body scans, and Nike's using it, Columbia Sportswear is using it, everybody's using it. And it's like this kind of CAT scan machine that bodies can go into, and we can see their exact measurements and measure them with a computer. And so that creates so much more information about how to fit, and actually fit and color are the two things that help create sales for a product so much more than anything, and repeat sales. So that's super important. Color, we haven't talked a lot about color design. That is a whole field, and it's a super fun field. You can get a degree in color science and color theory. I definitely studied it as part of my apparel program, and I loved it. You know, and that's something else that you guys can be working on while you're in school. Any kind of painting, drawing, sculpting, everything can go in and inform that process for you. I'll go back to some other questions. What happens if you wear Adidas to a meeting on Nike campus? You can't. So companies are pretty particular about that. And even I was when I had my own small company. And I'm sure you guys know some of the reasons for that. You know, you want to represent the company that you work for with pride. You want to see people wearing your product, because that means that people are going to see it and buy it. And that's just how we work. Do I have any experience with fashion shows? Yes. And exhibiting? Yes. I love fashion shows. I've directed probably 5 or 6 fashion shows here in Portland. The process that goes into making a fashion show involves a lot of cat herding with designers. Cat herding is like, as you can imagine, just pulling together a lot of creative people can sometimes be a task, but you know, you want to recognize their process, support them, bring them to the table. Oftentimes it ends up being something where a lot of people are very inspired by one another. They're very high pressure scenarios. So a lot of times people are creating the actual garments until the last minute. You have to work with models, you have to work with music. I have done live music as well as DJ'd music. You have to work with lighting. And for that kind of preparation, if you're interested in working in fashion shows, super fun, not happening a ton in Portland, not a lot of money in leading them in Portland. You're gonna need to go somewhere else for a while and then bring your expertise back to Portland. But there are people doing it. There will be more as the pandemic lets up. And if you have specific questions around fashion shows, please let me know. Have you ever worked on Nike Tech? I think it's a sweatsuit type outfit. No, but I do have some Nike Tech, and I know that, you know, they're using a blend of materials, which means, you know, it's like a cotton poly blend, probably with a little spandex. There's some bonding going into it. That's another really cool thing that's happening in Portland. Pencil is working with Bemis, and Nike works with Bemis. A lot of people work with Bemis. It's BEEMIS, and they just opened up a lab here. And they're working with like hot melt and bonding to create a lot of this outerwear that we're all seeing on the market. So what that really means is like, hey, I want to make a jacket that is waterproof, but I have to have a way to put it on my body. So it needs a zipper. But if I'm going to sew a zipper onto a jacket, I'm going to create a place where water can get in. So instead of sewing that zipper in, you're going to bond it in. So it's a big market. What's the culture like in fashion shows? Is it different than what you mentioned earlier? So the only fashion shows that I have participated in have been in Portland. And they have all been actually really friendly and a lot of camaraderie, a lot of encouragement. And I think that that's kind of the way the world's moving. I know there are bigger things happening, and I know that the culture in New York or Italy or Paris is so much more competitive. And so I would say that, it's always about your attitude in the world, and your level of confidence that you can bring, and your level of expertise that you can bring that can help you bring that confidence. There is always going to be competition in apparel. It's just the way it is. Let's see. Do you think Portland is behind in fashion versus New York? Yes. Hands down. I mean, and it's just the way the world works, right? So you have these kind of epicenters of where information and people are concentrated, and that's just the natural cycle of things, and it has been for thousands of years. You look back at Mesopotamia, and that was a culture filled with art, right? And technology. And so the same thing's happening here. So we are becoming more global. I'm not saying it's not possible for Portland to get as cool as New York, but I've been to fashion weeks in New York, and I've been to design weeks in New York, and I've only been as an observer. They're always really cutting edge and a lot of competition. And, for instance, if you're going to go from Portland to somewhere in the Midwest, you're probably going to step back 5 to 10 years in time as far as fashion. But if you're going to go from Portland to New York, you better bring your A game. Hopefully that makes sense. Are we doing okay for time, Goldilocks? Should I keep going with these questions?
Yes, we're still good in time.
Okay. I'll go back and ask some more, but free fill. It has been a really long week. Sorry. After one of the things that happens in apparel is Chinese New Year and holiday. So we go on holiday and we have to get a whole bunch of stuff done. And then Asia is really busy working, and they take a little bit of time off too. And then we come back and we all have to work super hard until Chinese New Year, which changes every year, but it's around February, and that's just the product development cycle. So right now my brain is going really busy. Let's see, what skills are needed? So kind of going back to some of that, there's so many different jobs in the apparel industry. There are so many different skill types that you will want to have. But if I could emphasize the fact that all of these are definitely going to need digital skills. So whether that means that you're developing materials, creating surface designs or graphics, creating patterns to make the apparel, or to actually just sketch it up and come up with the materials as designers do, you're going to be using the computer. So we use all kinds of Excel sheets or different versions of that. We have really cool programs called Miro, where you can put a ton of different information up, and it's just an endless kind of notebook page. And you can share that with everyone. It's a lot like Google Docs, only fancier. And then learning the Adobe suite. So mostly Illustrator and Photoshop are super important. And then the digital programs that I talked about earlier, Clo is really leading the way. The reason that Clo is so much more interesting is it's kind of like you took Illustrator and Optitext, which is a pattern making program, and then an avatar, and you put them all together, and that just creates a ton of capability. And a lot of the cool thing around that, especially as a tech designer right now, is that I can then take the sketch from the designer, and I can take a pattern that I had from the past, and I can change that pattern to look like this sketch, and I can put it on an avatar and actually build a prototype. I can put surface design on there, so I could put a print. I can change different colors. There's different fabric types available, just depending on the library that's built with the company that you're working for. And I can completely eliminate having to do a physical prototype. So as far as everyone's work process going faster and being more efficient, but also it being much more sustainable because I'm not creating piles of things that aren't going to be used, it's a pretty phenomenal scenario. So everyone that I've seen fresh out of school has learned digital, and I'm sure you guys will too. Looks like there's some new questions. Is there an easy work-life balance? Yes, if you make it happen for yourself. I think it depends on the company that you're working for. Again, if you're going to go work in New York, which is phenomenal, as an experience, you're going to be working easily 10-12-hour days. I just recently heard someone on the radio saying, well, gosh, I guess we're going to have to start sending people home before 10 o'clock at night. I don't work until 10 o'clock at night here in Portland, which is a really nice thing. On occasion, when there are projects that, you know, we have to just get done, we'll go ahead and do them. But I think, you know, people ask questions about the culture. I think people are much more aware of the fact that you need to keep your employees happy, and part of sustainability, I don't know if you guys know about the sustainability stool, 3 legs. It's people, environment, and what now and money. I guess that's the other one. And so, you know, if you're not creating sustainability for people in the workplace, they're going to burn out, and people are starting to see it. So I'm really happy that you guys are coming into the workforce and that kind of culture. Am I able to share a screen share with an app? I can't unfortunately do that. I'm so sorry, because it's something that Nike owns. But if you just go online and look up Clo, you will find YouTube tutorials. You will find the actual website that their company has, and you'll find out a lot about it. I think that OSU is using Browseware, but I think a lot of schools are working with Clo as well. And it kind of doesn't matter which one you learn, as long as you have that 3D experience, then you'll get hired. Right now, that's a huge thing. What are my favorite books and movies around this topic? Wow, I'm terrible at recalling movie names, but some of my favorite designers are Issey Miyake, Issey Miyake, Miyake. He has had a massive, long career, and he's phenomenal. There are so many brands in the world. You can just search things. One of my favorite things to do is go to Powell's and just look at books. And they have a whole fashion section. It's on the 4th floor. If you go all the way up all those steps, and then you go to the left-hand side, there's like an aisle, and then you go maybe 1, 2 down and to the back toward the windows. That's the fashion section. Just go and hang out and look at the books. Go to the library and look at books. Oftentimes for me, materials are a huge inspiration. So I have a collection of materials from India, from Peru, from like all of my travels that I've done. And I love to go back and work with those and look at those. You know, they have all different aspects. Some of them are hand woven. So that's really fascinating. There is a really interesting community in Portland called the Portland Textiles Project. And I'll send Goldilocks a list of things for you guys after this, so you can kind of look for a few things, but they're on Instagram. There's a Portland Textiles archive that's super fascinating. Okay. Any other questions? What is the hiring outlook on this career? What's the hiring process? So of course, you know, you're going to need a resume, but in addition to a resume, you're also going to need a portfolio. And all of those portfolios are now online. So I have my own website, and I think that's just kind of a typical thing to do. It's kind of hard to get a job without it now. And then you're going to need a really killer cover letter that's very, very real and tells people why you want to get hired. And so then after you apply for those jobs with that stuff, then you go through an interview process, and there are specific interview questions that they ask, a lot of why questions and how would you handle kind of questions, and what did you do in this scenario. And for you guys not having a ton of experience, that's okay. You can apply a life experience to that. There's a really good website that's helped me get a lot of jobs. It's called muse.com, MUSE.com. Okay, great. Sounds like people are having to leave a little bit. I am happy to follow up, as I said, Goldilocks, with a list of resources here locally that might be interesting to the students. Are there any other questions? How do I try to combat the fast fashion industry? Such a good question. Good job. So in sustainability, there's a lot of, like, in the beginning, there was a lot of punishment factor. And that meant, like, we should train consumers to not want all of this stuff. And then now we realize as designers, like, it's not just about training consumers, because consumers are always going to need clothes. They're always going to buy clothes. And what's really interesting about clothing is that while the price of a home has gone up exponentially over the last 50 years, clothing has not gone up in price compared to everything else. And so it is a battle. It's a very difficult battle. But there are so many different parts of the apparel industry at this point that I really feel like fast fashion could do better. They are doing a lot better. I will mention the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and I can send a link to you guys. They have worked with H&M and Nike and a lot of these bigger brands that are producing a ton of stuff, and the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, so SAC, to create avenues where we're thinking about things differently. And so if you're interested in sustainability, and I hope everyone is, that would be an amazing paper to read. I'll forward that along. Ellen MacArthur is this very inspiring woman who went out on her sailboat for a year all by herself and sailed around the world as a woman on her own. Like, wow. And just because I could never imagine doing that, I don't like to swim that much. But while she was out there, she had all of these amazing epiphanies about how the world works and how we're using stuff, and how she had to reuse things on her sailboat over and over again. There's also a really cool book out. I'm reading Sweetgrass, something else. I'll send the title along as well. And that is a lot about ecology and how Native Americans thought about things, and what our relationship is, people and the environment, and how important that is to be able to visualize a future where we can be successful. So I'll send those links along. I would say that information is always your #1 tool when it comes to battling fast fashion, or anything else for that matter. Are there any other questions? And Goldilocks, where are we on time?
So we're exactly at on the hour, and you have one more question if you.
Oh, sure. What happens if the consumer is only able to afford fast fashion clothing? How would you go about trying to make it more affordable and sustainable? Oh, after my own heart. Good job, Lily. Yeah, I think that's a really cool question. And I'm going to call out Kroger. I worked for Kroger for a while. And I don't know if you guys know that that's Fred Meyer, but I did a senior tech design job there for a while, and a lot of the work was around that. And so, you know, I personally find it extremely inspirational to build fashion for real people that they're going to be able to afford and use for a long time. Unfortunately, in apparel, the profit margins, which that's basically how much you're going to make after all the costs involved of labor, materials, trims, all that stuff, shipping, the profit margins are very thin. And then when you get to these kind of more fast fashion scenarios, like grocery stores, the profit margins become even thinner. And so then they have to build on volume to make the money. And oftentimes what they do is compromise on fabrics, like the quality of the fabrics. They often compromise on the quality of production. And production is a pretty ugly beast sometimes. So that's why I've traveled a lot to go check out a lot of production facilities and make sure that they're actually treating people well. It's a huge part of the job. There are a lot of standards in place at this point. Okotex and Blue Sign are both standards that help with you know, water process all the way to people and how they're being treated. And so you can, you know, encourage buying clothes. Like H&M has a part of their line that is, I think, Blue Sign or Okotex, and they have actually been a part of some of these big conversations. And I think Target has a few things. You can buy those things and you can work toward those things. And just the more of us who, you know, even at Nike, if I don't bring it up in a meeting, if I'm not the voice there bringing it up in a meeting, maybe it's not going to happen. So that's the most important part. Are you keeping it in mind? What are you buying? How are you making a $7 organic cotton t-shirt look cool? It's a pretty tough question you're asking, and I think a lot of people are working on it, and we certainly don't have all the answers, but I think that working on things with that raw materials perspective in mind is going to help all of us. So, you know, like what I said, you know, you have a flower that produces this cotton, and we're going to pick that cotton and we're going to use it. So what does it take to create that flower? And there are a lot of studies out there about what it takes to make a t-shirt and the footprint on the planet. So carbon footprint is a huge thing. And that's part of some of the work that I've done is life cycle analyses. And so we're building on all of that, and we need a lot more work for it. And welcome to your future, if that's what you want to do, because that's where it's at.
All right, if you guys don't have any more questions, we'll let Jennifer get some little rest that she can get.
Go back to work.
Just an additional on the fast fashion for students, take care of your clothes. That's how you can, you know, you can contribute to the sustainable kind of thing. And read the tags. The tags has information how you take care of your clothes. So
yeah, that's a huge part of things. Something I just designed is going to have a repair kit that come along with it, because yeah, that's a great thing. And also washing and drying and how much energy use that causes. So, you know, freezing your pants instead of washing them. Good call.
all right, thank you so much. And I'm going to email you about the industrial design, your husband, because we do want that.
Oh, I'm sure you do. He would be really fun to talk with. Okay, well, thanks for all of your questions, you guys. And thank you so much for having me, Goldilocks, and asking me to join. And I really appreciate your time. And I wish you all the best of luck. And I'll send you a list of things, and feel free to reach out.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, guys.